game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One2One.
Our guest today is quite the remarkable individual. Kola Masha is a renowned Nigerian entrepreneur and agricultural expert, making significant strides in empowering smallholder farmers through his social enterprise aptly named Babban Gona. His mission is to attract young people to agriculture, addressing Nigeria's pressing issue of youth unemployment. Kola Masha, welcome to One2One. Pleasure to be here. Good. All right, so we'll dive straight into it. So your social enterprise, Babban Gona, was described by Harvard Business School as being one of the largest farming operations in the world, with 140,000 acres of maize farms, an area equivalent to 12 times the size of Manhattan. But before I go on to ask you the questions I really want to bring out of this, I mean, do you focus exclusively on maize?
So we focus primarily on maize. We do experiment with other commodities, but we find that maize provides that unique opportunity of the ability to reach such a large number of farmers and a huge scale, and also a market that is where the demand is growing so much that we don't run into a problem when we are very successful, that there's a glut.
Okay. All right. So, single largest maize producing entity throughout the continent of Africa. That is correct.
Correct.
In terms of empowering farmers, Babban Gona has supported 110,000 farmers so far.
Well, those numbers are actually dependent on how you look at it. If we typically look at it on a cumulative basis, which is now we've supported over 500,000.
500,000. And of course, you are also, I gather, franchising outside of Nigeria as well. So
it is our aspiration. I think as we look at, we're long-term thinkers. We usually do about 20-year plans. And so our most recent 20-year plan we completed in 2023 was to support 50 million farmers across Africa, which would require us to basically enable others to replicate what we do, utilizing the power of technology.
You're increasing yields and income to up to 3 times the national average, I gather. You've attracted millions of dollars in funding and investment from several of the world's most prominent development finance institutions, commercial banks and private equity firms. Your company has deployed over $200 million in financing to smallholder farmers through cooperatives associated with your franchise. My reading of this really is that much of this is a means to an end, isn't it? Tell me about the vision, your vision for Babban Gona, really, and also how precisely have you done this? I mean, this is all underpinned by sustainable business, isn't it? And how have you managed in the meantime, at the same time, to facilitate such a tidal wave of international finance capital and will, not just towards yourselves, but towards Nigeria?
So first and foremost, I'll begin with this answering the second question. I think we've not done this alone. We've been exceptionally blessed to have an incredible group of partners that believed in us when we were very small. I think folks look at our scale we are today, but forget we started with just 100 farmers. And we started very, very modest scale. We had an organization called Kiva that gave us our first $20,000 when we started. And so I think, fundamentally, I think to be able to scale as effectively as we have and build the level of credibility to attract the capital that we have, I think it's been we've used, I think, worn out tools, time and tested methods. We've first and foremost planned very far ahead. So we know what we want to accomplish today, but we have a clear vision of what we want to do in 20 years. And we think about who are the partners we need to engage to reach that goal and start those conversations very early. So many of these conversations we've had with funding partners take years. right? Our biggest equity investor was a 7-year conversation, right? We just closed a transaction now with one of the European governments that we've been having conversations for over a decade, right? So I think that patience and that ability to think long term, I think have been critical.
Hmm.
Now, to your first question, um, really, it began with a recognition with myself and my wife, my co-founder, that we recognized that we were very fortunate. I think we both had excellent education and work experience, and we realized that we could leverage that to really help not only our country but our continent. And so our approach was very simple. We said, what went back to first principles and asked ourselves, what's that intersection of what we enjoy doing and what we do well? And that's really building early stage businesses that create significant impact. And so we then asked ourselves, okay, if we want to create significant impact, let's tackle the most serious problem facing not just our nation, but the continent. And we recognized that was really a dramatic growth in insecurity. This was back in 2010. We had seen the Niger Delta insurgency, the rise of Boko Haram, and some of the challenges around that we're seeing today. And I think we knew that at its core was the fact that we'd seen this massive growth in youth unemployment. And we knew that that problem was only going to get significantly worse. So we challenged ourselves to basically go out and create around 10 million jobs over the course of the next 20 years, and then basically work backwards to identify a industry and a business model that could be that job creation engine that could unlock jobs at that scale.
And that really is the essence of what you're doing, isn't it? You're literally choking the life, the oxygen out of youth disempowerment and perhaps insurgency as well. But let's talk a little bit about your commitment to this, Kola Masha. You went from MIT and Harvard to living in, it's part of the legend of Kola Masha now, to residing in a small northern Nigerian village for, I believe, 2 years?
On and off for extended periods of time.
On and off for extended periods of time. How modest. Okay. All right. So what precisely motivated that decision, that personal experience, that decision to engage in that personal journey yourself? And what did you learn from it, and how's that informed your approach to your enterprise in the years that followed?
So I've always been very fortunate that I have a personal desire for focus, right? So I generally don't do many things. I do a small handful of things, and I try to focus on doing those things as well as I can. And I've also recognized that that the reality is, if you want to really create significant change in a system, you have to understand that at a level of detail that is exceptionally granular. So the benefit of being focused is then I can dedicate my time to really delving into that. So in the early days of Babban Gona, one of the reasons we started with such a modest number of farmers is because I wanted a scenario where I could literally do every job. Right. So I drove the truck, I drove the tractor, I lifted 50 kilo bags of fertilizer. The one thing I wasn't able to do, I couldn't lift a 100 kilo bag of maize, but I tried.
I'm looking for the muscles.
But I think, it's that ability to get in that level of detail that really helps you to understand the real problems and then be able to create solutions that are truly innovative. And I think it also creates a secondary benefit that, we were able to not only understand our customer, the smallholder farmer, at an exceptional level of detail. In those early days as well, I actually farmed about 1.5 hectares of maize myself to try to make sure I understood
Right.
as best I could. But it also helps you engender trust. And I think, in the type of business that we run, trust is at the absolute core. And I think that was not a planned thing, but a very important thing that came out of that, getting into that level of detail.
So you run a social enterprise, but of course it's a for-profit social enterprise. And I think you alluded to that, the importance of that earlier in this conversation. All of this tremendous work you're doing, of course, must be underpinned by sustainable business.
Correct.
Can you tell me a little bit, just talk a little bit about the unique business and operating model that you use and how you came to believe actually that that was the best way to approach solving the problems you identified and what you wanted to do in the medium and long term?
Well, it all came down to a recognition that if you wanted to support, our initial goal was to support 1 million farmers. And when we started, before we launched everything, back to my getting into a little bit of detail, built a spreadsheet that went down to like row 1,000 and something, and out to like column, AX or something, that basically mapped out as best we could what the business could look like over 20 years. And what that showed was very clear. The level of capital that you needed to pull in was tremendous. For just 1 million farmers, you needed to pull in about $1 billion in capital. And so it became very clear that to accomplish the impact we needed at scale, we needed to be able to build a system that could sustain large amounts of debt. And so what that required was to then, if you're going to scale a business with debt, you have to ensure that it has the structures and discipline to be able to have exceptionally high repayment rates. So for us, the first thing that we did was we spent nearly the first 2 years of launch just trying to understand the key risks associated with lending smallholder farmers, and developed a holistic methodology we call our 10 levels of risk mitigation that has enabled us to date, operate with over a 99% repayment rate. The other piece was recognizing that you had to have a business model that actually could be financially sustainable. And that is quite challenging when you're dealing with a customer that is very small and a customer that doesn't have a ton of resources. So what we recognized was very important was that you had to build a business model where, when you have a customer that doesn't do a lot of transactions with you, you need to think about the customer's full value chain and how you can support them all across, so that on an aggregate basis with each customer, you're able to make it financially sustainable. And so that then created one more challenge, which then is when you're supporting a customer like we do a smallholder farmer holistically, end to end, right? We support them with training, financing, everything they need on their farm, including the empty bag, the needle and thread, store their grains, market it. It's a really holistic solution. It then layers in tremendous amount of complexity, which then requires you to build a culture of true continuous improvement that allows you to continuously tweak and get better and better and better and better, to the point where today we're very proud of the fact that we just completed an independent third-party survey that surveys us and dozens and dozens of agricultural interventions across the continent, and we by far had one of the highest customer ratings of any organization on the continent.
Still on the subject of challenges, climate change. Of course, you live with that consideration every day. How is that impacting upon your social enterprise? Crop yields, precipitation patterns, water shortages. How's it affecting you now? And how big an issue do you think that is likely to be in the years to come?
So I think we are fortunate in Nigeria that relative to other parts of Africa, we're not likely going to see as big of impact. I think there's been a fair number of studies that have shown that, is you're, below the Sahel region, so Sudan region, Guinea Savannah, so on and so forth, that you might see crop yield impact somewhere in the range of maybe 10 to 15%. Now, if you're in, say, the Sahel region, you're going to see a much, much greater impact. And those regions are going to be much more significantly impacted. So for us, I think, we've tried to focus our interventions in areas where that risk can be managed, either through insurance or that the incidence of that risk is so infrequent enough that the farmers are able to build up enough of a cash buffer that they can ride out those negative years. So what we're seeing right now is we're seeing pretty much a 1 in 10 year event risk, and we were hoping that stabilizes, and we don't start seeing a significant increase in risk. Now, the reality is what we see in terms of specific risks is it's the extreme weather events, which tend to be extreme floods. We don't see, thankfully, as much extreme droughts in this region. As I mentioned, Sahel region, definitely, I think that's more of a risk. We've seen an increased incidence of what we call mini droughts. So where a farmer might plant and then, it may not rain for another 10 or 15 days. But we've been able to help support them with additional technology such as drought-tolerant seeds developed by really some of the best plant pathologists and agronomists on the continent that get them access to technology that can ride out some of those types of risks.
So AI, you talked earlier about technology and the fact that you've invested quite heavily in that. How do you expect artificial intelligence to affect the approach to agriculture in years to come, in this part of the world, and considering specifically what you're doing?
Well, we're very clear on what its role is going to be with us. I think AI is all the buzz today. But Babban Gona, we've been building AI models since 2018, 2019, right? We've built some of the most advanced AI imaging models on the continent. We have trained AIs that can, with over 2 million images, that I can take a picture of a farmer's field and it'll tell me across 3 parameters what's wrong with that field. So fundamentally for us, we know that AI is going to enable us to do more. And we're really focused on building really those cutting edge solutions using AI that will enable us to scale the level of our impact at a much more accelerated rate.
So Kola Masha, announcing the Skoll Award in 2017, Sally Osberg, President and CEO of the Skoll Foundation, remarked, "This year's recipients are social entrepreneurs who deeply understand that human dignity depends on the security that comes from knowing fundamental needs are met, not least in the areas of health, food, shelter, and safety. Only when those needs are fulfilled can all people achieve their full potential." Very important words, very true. What did it mean to you to receive such an award in 2017, and how meaningful, by how much do those words resonate with you then and perhaps even now?
Well, thank you for that. I think fundamentally, we were very honored and felt very privileged to receive the Skoll Award. Not only were we the first organization in West Africa to receive the award that year, tied with another organization, Liberia, but we were the first for-profit social enterprise in history to receive the award. And I think that's something that's very important to us because we believe that, there's a very important role for nonprofits in driving social change. But I think until we're able to really mobilize the full power of the private sector, can we really create the scale of change that we want. Now, to the words themselves, I think it's something that's also been very, very important to us from day one. And that is, we've been very focused on trying to accomplish something that is typically not done kind of the social entrepreneurship space. Usually you have organizations that fall into two buckets. They're either providing very deep impact, meaning that they're fundamentally changing people's lives, but they tend to have limited scale because of the complexity. And then you have organizations that are having somewhat of a important impact, but it's a lighter touch intervention, but they're able to do it at a much greater scale. So on an aggregate, they're having a deep impact. We, from day one, have recognized the important need to accomplish both. So we go for significant depth of impact at significant scale.
So let me digress a little bit. What I call is a digression, but it's really coming back to the heart of the matter. Insurgency. And I'm really keen to understand what your experience with that, because as far as I'm concerned, you're right at the heart of it all, philosophically as well as geographically, and considering what you are doing. What has your experience of this issue been, and how much do you really believe that your work is causing a dent in the problem?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. It's one of those questions I've asked a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, and they also struggle because fundamentally you have to prove that what you did prevented something from happening in the future. So, it is a challenging question. I think fundamentally what we look at instead are what are some of the other symptoms that we're seeing. So I think for us, one of the big ones that we see is, the fact that we don't screen for age in what we do. We support any farmer that meets our criteria and comes in. However, Babban Gona has consistently had a average age of farmers that is typically around the ages of about 30, 35 years old, right? When you look at the average age of farmers as stated by the Nigerian government, those numbers tend to be closer to 50 or 55, right? So what is it that we're doing differently that's attracting young people to farming? And we also see the fact that we have countless data points of young people that left the rural communities to come to the urban areas, but actually decided to come back, right? Because now they can actually make a living in their ancestral home, and so I think really that stems from the fact that in the design of what we did with Babban Gona, we were very, very focused on actually designing it so that we could address the underlying fundamental challenges that young farmers have, not just any farmer, but specifically young farmers. And so by addressing those key constraints that young farmers have, we've actually enabled young farmers to truly become profitable. And with that, we feel that we're having a significant impact on issues around insecurity.
So would you go back to live in that small northern village?
100%. I'm telling you, I would recommend it to anybody. I think the reality is that the Nigerian countryside is exceptionally beautiful. It's very unfortunate that we've never really capitalized on that as an asset with tourism and so on and so forth. But you're waking up at 4:00 in the morning and walking out of my little room that I had in this small village, and seeing how the beautiful rock formations that we have dotted across the countryside there, and seeing just how over the course of the seasons how the entire landscape just changes. It's truly amazing.
Okay. Well, I've been playing a game with myself in my mind throughout this conversation, trying to work out which village it was. I have failed comprehensively. So perhaps you'd like to volunteer that piece of information. Which village was it?
So it's a little place called Salah. Right. I'm sure not many people have heard of it, but yes.
So let's talk about your inspiration for all of this. If you were to name a particular individual or individuals who've influenced you and inspired you along this path, who might they be?
I think hands down, I think my, none of this would be possible without my co-founder, my wife. I've been very fortunate to have a spouse that has been exceptionally instrumental in the success that we've had. So I think that's uh, definitely definitely very key. I would say that we've had when I look back and reflect on um, those individuals that believed in us when Babban Gona was just an idea, or Babban Gona was very, very, very small. Um, we've been incredibly blessed to have folks that have not sure why, but just once we were able to share our vision, what we want to accomplish, they were ready to support. Now, not always right away. I remember one of our very early investors. I went to pitch him on the idea of Babban Gona, and he let's put it this way, was less than enthused, but without our knowledge, would come during our first year and visit our operations, talk to the farmers, and just see that we were actually creating real impact at scale. And after a year, picked up the phone and called me and said, come by my office and let's talk, and wrote us one of our biggest initial checks. So I think we've been blessed.
Kola Masha, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you as well. We've had a wonderful conversation with Kola Masha. See you next time on One2One.